Hey, Finley.
Hi, Dad.
How are we?
Good, how are you?
Very good. So we are now to our very first episode of the actual Shine lesson that we're
This
going
is
to
so
be
exciting.
doing. APA.
Good job.
APA, Shine. Shine, you know. So our first lesson that we're going to be doing is going to be Genesis first and second chapter. So what I'm kind of hoping that we can do with these is we can give a little bit of in-depth detail on kind of some of the lessons that we have planned out, and then you can take that and then convert that to a little kid version, but at least kind of give you a background on the verse, how we're doing it. And the big thing is I talk about this thin red line, and that thin red line is all about Jesus. So, where do you see Jesus in these stories? So let's just say I'm going to start off and I'm going to nerd out just a little bit.
Can I nerd out with you?
Of course, I'm always doing it.
Yes.
Mass equivalent equation. The mass energy equivalence equation was one that's developed by Einstein 100 years
Einstein
ago.
pizza?
No. And the mass equivalence, or the mass energy equivalence equation, is one that when I read Genesis 1, it's just absolutely what I go to. And it's just, I don't know, I'm just nerds out. This is not Bible, this is just me, but I think it's really fun. So, if you say God is energy, yeah, you're not wrong. This is all fun. If God is energy, then the way God created man, in the beginning, God created. How did he create heaven and earth? The mass energy equation from Einstein, do you remember it?
Mass.
Energy equals
Energy equals
mass
mass
times the square
times light.
times the speed of light squared.
Dang it, I'm so close.
E equals mc squared. So we've all heard E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. So what that means is if you take energy and if you take matter and you speed it up times the speed of light squared, it becomes pure energy. And at the same time, if you take pure energy, God, and you slow it down by the square of the speed of light, it becomes matter. So is that how God created the heavens and the earth? I don't know, but it makes sense to me, so that's kind of what I go with, and I like it. I know, I'm nerded out. But let me get into some more physics here about where you can actually see physics in this. So in the beginning, God created. So you have nothing, and you from that become something. So what is stuff made out of?
Atoms.
Atoms. And what atoms are held together by is the strong and weak nuclear forces.
I have a question.
Yes,
Are atoms made out of atom?
every one of them. Every atom I know is made out of nothing but atoms.
No. Like,
Every non-atom I know is made out of atoms.
No. Like the atom and Eve is
Exactly.
atom made.
Or Adam Hampton, he's made out of atoms too.
No. Are atoms descendants from Adam?
Yeah, all of them. They're all stuff.
Ah.
But so when you have this slope, this weak and strong nuclear energy force, that is the making of things, of matter. Then we go into verse 2. The earth was formless and void. So the earth, the stuff was just there. There was nothing there. There wasn't a globe of an earth. It was formless and void. There was no form to it. It was just kind of like a big gas. And so that means it had nothing to form it into a shape. God created gravity, and that's what took into a form.
Like the roller coaster, zero gravity?
There's zero gravity would be no form. This is God made a form.
Ah.
And then in verse 3, you had God said, "Let there be light."
Boom.
So here's the thing. Where did the light come from?
Atoms.
Was it? I don't know. Where did this light come from now?
Hydrogen. And
Hydrogen.
gas.
And where does that come from? The sun?
Yeah.
That's not what happens here, though.
They just say, let there be light. Boom.
Exactly. So where did the light come from?
God.
That's kind of my thoughts, is it could be just from God. It could be just kind of in the air. But either way, God created the ability for light. He created the electromagnetic force. It's not over until verse 16 that we actually have the sun and the earth form. We'll get there in a little bit.
That's cool.
But yeah, so he created light, but what he really
like the
created...
light that we use for our YouTube channel?
Like the YouTube channel light. but where he created the electromagnetic force. So here you create, God's creating these individual forces that we study in physics. And for me, I know I'm kind of nerding out, but man, that's just really cool.
We're both nerding out.
Yeah, you know. Let's go back to the story and let's go talk a little bit about the different types of storytelling between American Western way of thinking and Jewish Eastern thought. Now, when you tell a story, what part of the story do you start at?
The beginning.
And where do you end?
The end.
Exactly, that makes sense, right? But
The
that's
real
because
short
you're
story. In the beginning. The end.
exactly. But that's because you have a Western thinking mind.
I don't have my cowboy hat on. Why do you think it's Western?
Because it's not Eastern.
Ah.
So a
What?
Eastern mind does not think this linear progression of beginning and end. It thinks more of what is the most important thing. And instead of beginning, end, and weave in that important things, you take the important things and you talk about it and again and again and again. I think it's more like an onion, and you can go and you
Core,
can
and you
look.
cut it, and there's a whole bunch
Yeah.
of cores.
So you talk about it, and then you talk about it again, and then you talk about it again.
and then yeah.
And that's exactly what you have in Genesis 1 and 2. So you have the exact same story, the creation of the world, told 3 different times. Now then, the first one is the shortest one. The first one is really short, sweet, to the point, and that is Genesis 1:1 that says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." So that's it. That's everything you need to know. What else do you need to know? God created the heavens and earth. There's nothing more than heavens, there's nothing more than earth, and God created it all. And that's all we need to know. God created the heaven and the earth. But it then tells the exact same story again, starting in chapter 1, verse 2, and it says, "The earth was formless and void." And so you start with this 7-day narrative. And this 7-day goes into a lot of detail of the order he created and a little bit more detail on how he created it. And there's a few things that we're going to kind of talk about a little bit here, both based on days and based on the timeline in the Bible. So
Let's see if you don't say chapters this time and actually say verses.
yeah, I'm sure I'll say chapters when I mean verses more than once. But we already talked about in chapter 1, verse 3, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And so that was one of the big things. The other big thing is in verse 6 and 7, and he said, now then, I need your help here. Let me see your hand. He said, "Let there be an expanse. Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters." So there's waters and an expanse between them. Now, what do you think that expanse is? Land?
Water.
Like this? What's between the water?
What did Sam do to my earth?
Yeah. So it
My
makes
poor
sense to me
earth.
whenever I've read this before that, oh, that's got to be land, right? He put the land. But,
I think it's actually.
well, if you look here, what's it say right here in verse 7? God made the expanse which separated the waters which were below from the expanse and the waters above. So you had waters below and waters above with an expanse in between. That doesn't sound like Earth, does it?
It sounds more like a cloud that's gonna rain.
Yeah, we referred to it as a vapor barrier. You had this, or vapor canopy, you had this really, really super thick wall of clouds,
Like
the vapor
like
canopy.
with Noah.
This is going to be very important when we get to Noah, because up until that point, you had this vapor canopy. Besides, where's Noah going to get enough rain for 40 days and 40 nights?
The
answer
big
is
cloud
a
wall.
big vapor barrier. So for one reason, and I don't fully understand it, when God created the earth in the beginning, you had oceans, and then you had the expanse, the air that we live in, and then you had this big vapor canopy of clouds above. Kind of different. And then if you even kind of question that before, look down in 9, where he said, "Let the waters below the heavens gathered into one place, let the dry land appear." So you've got this separation above and below, and then later on you're going to get this separation of the earth that's going to separate the waters. But that's on day 2. So on day 2, you now get this dry land. And here's the other important thing that's kind of nice. God called God called the earth, and the seas. Why did God get to name it?
Because he's God.
He's
and he
God.
created it.
He created. What's Sam's turtle's name?
That's my turtle.
Who named it?
Me.
Okay, what's your turtle's name?
Bob.
Why is it called Bob?
Bob Joe.
Why didn't I get to name it or they get to name it? Because it's y'all's turtle.
It's my turtle. I found it.
It's y'all's turtle, so y'all get to name it. And here, God created the earth and the seas, so he gets to create it. So keep reading on, day 3. And now here in verse 16, we get into the 2 great lights, the greater light to govern the day, the lesser light to govern the night, the moon and the sun, and also the stars. And so once again, way back in verse 3, we had the light being created, but there wasn't a sun or a moon. It wasn't until verse 16 that you actually get the creation of the sun and the moon. So that's why I really like going back and looking at this more from a physics equation, a physics problem. God created the ability light. He created the electromagnetic force, and it wasn't until 16 that he actually gathered the hydrogen together to make a big sun and lit it up.
All I'm hearing is science, 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 Bible, 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 science, 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 and Bible,
Because
Bible,
it all
Bible.
goes together. This is certainly not a science book, but it has science
Facts.
stuff in it. It's you can prove it by science. It's really crazy. So let's go keeping on in, there was evening, there's morning, the 4th day. And then in chapter 20, the 5th day started. And here's one of the crazy things that is on the 5th day. He said, let's look at, he created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves, which the water swarmed after their kind and winged after their kind, and it was good. So you see this over and over. God said, let the waters teem with the swarms of living creatures and let the birds fly across the expanse. So God spoke, and how many birds were there? Everywhere. How many fish were there? Everywhere.
Besides the land.
Well, it gets into the land too. That's down on day 5 over here. Made the beast of the earth of their kinds and the cattle and the creeps on the earth, and he saw that it was good in verse 25. So these he made all at once. Then we get to man, and man is made in verse 26. And there are several really important things in verse 26. Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the skies and the birds and the cattle and over the creeping things of the earth. And God created man in his image. In the image of God he created him.
I prepared for this. God has created all and set man in charge of it all.
Very good. But notice with man, he creates man one at a time. With birds, with fish, with animals,
he
makes
sets
them
it
all.
all.
But with man, he starts at one at a time. And he makes one. And here's the other really crazy thing in verse 26. And then God said, let us make man in our own image. So when God says us, who's he talking to?
Jesus.
Jesus! It's like, come on, we're in the Bible, it's Jesus. And this is something that is actually really important. It's one of those verses that I just kind of, okay, he made us in our image, yeah, whatever. But that's the Trinity. That's the Trinity right
Like
there
our
at the
church,
very
Trinity?
beginning. That's the name of our church, yeah. You go look back in all the way into the beginning here in the first chapter of Genesis, and you see proof of the Trinity. And the reason the Trinity is so important is because of the relationship aspect of God. God is one God. There is one God, period, end of story. But the Trinity has an ability for God to know and understand relationships. Finley understands promises and keeping her word, and understands how to interact with other people because she's around other people. And because God has, from the beginning, had other people, other parts of God, other heads of God, that there's a relationship that God understands a promise. And not because he invented, but because there's a relationship between two people and two entities, that this promise, that this relationship is. And because of that, when God makes us a promise, then that promise is one that we can count on because we have full confidence in God understands the relationship aspect of a promise. There are other monotheistic religions that do not have this multiple head, and their God, even in their religion, is able to change his mind even after promises, because the promise that he made is not something that is relational, because it's just him. There's no one above him. There's no one equal to him in their mindset. Here, you have a triune God. You have three in one. And because there's a plurality.
Like a sandwich.
Like a sandwich.
Or an Oreo.
Yes. But because of this plurality, relationships are built into God's character, who God is. And without that plurality, then the relationship, the promise that he has with us would be questionable. But with it, God knows truth, God knows relationships, God knows promises, because he is a multi-being God. And just like in your relationships with humans, we have three types of relationships. Relationships with ourselves, relationships with one other person, and a relationship with other people. With the triune, God has that ability. He has the ability to have a relationship with himself, a relationship with one other, and a relationship with multiple others. And so this plurality of God, this Trinity, while it is impossible for our finite minds to understand, it's seen at the beginning, and it is extraordinarily important for God's relationship with us and how we are able to relate and trust his relationship with us. Kind of crazy, isn't it?
Yes.
It's deep stuff. It's very deep stuff. But, so God makes us all in one. Makes the animals all in one, but with us, he makes us all separate. And let me look at one other thing here that's kind of interesting, is in verse 30, he says that, and to every beast of the earth and every bird of the sky and to everything that moves on the earth which give life, I have given every green plant for food.
Like Grogu.
Excuse me.
You're excused.
So
You're
here,
excused again.
thank you. God gives the fruit, the vegetables, the plants for food. At this point, he doesn't give meat. There are other animals, but it's not given to do meat just at this point. That will be something that we will see later on. There's another, where did it go? And
Wait, where did it go? I never
that
heard of
I
that kind of
really
animal.
enjoy here is now let's go on to verse 2 or to chapter 2 more. Verse 18, we've got set up now with Adam and Eve, and with Adam in the garden in verse 2, and he basically recounts the exact same story again. So remember, this is the same story 3 times. The first time was, in the beginning God created the heavens and earth. Simple. Then we go into the 7-day trek. Now we're going to go into, in chapter 2, a more detailed of the crown jewel of God's creation, and that is man,
Me.
you and me. It's also
it's
one of those
only
things
me,
to
me only.
you and you. There's also one area to remember that God didn't put Bible verses and chapters in here. Man did that. And there's some places that I think man did a bad job. And this is a great example because this third telling of the story starts in chapter 2, verse 4. Why didn't they make that chapter 2, verse 1 and move everything up? That would have been a whole lot easier. But, in the beginning of 2, they just God rests. The
God
seventh
rests.
day.
I'm
But
tired
and
of
then
rest.
in verse 4 of chapter 2, we have a retelling. And in 4, 5, and 6, we have a retelling of the exact same story, but in a much more abbreviated portion because we want to get to the meat, the important stuff. Remember, we've got a whole other chapter that's just about the most
Like
important
bacon?
thing. That is important. In this account of the heavens and the earth, when they were created on the day that the Lord made the heaven and earth, no shrub of the field yet had sprouted. The God had not sent on earth where there was no rain. A mist used to rise from above the ground. And that was basically the entire first chapter, or retold in these few verses. And in verse 7, God gets to what he really wants to talk about. Then the Lord God formed man out of dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living being. So right here we have once again the creation of man.
Aren't humans the smartest mammal on Earth?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
And God creates them one at a time. He makes them out of dirt, breathe air into their nostrils, and then goes and he walks them through the garden and basically shows them how to live. In verse 15, it says that man must work hard. He must work and do things. In 16, we have a very interesting thing though. So you remember whenever God made all these things, he kept saying, and it is good, and it is good.
Yeah.
In verse 16, the Lord commanded man, saying, everything you may eat for thee, but the tree of the knowledge, oh no, where are we? All right, in verse 18. Then the Lord said, it is not good. Do you know what was the first thing that was not good?
He was alone.
He was alone. Man was alone. Man didn't have a companion. And so God said, this is not good. And it's the first time it's used. It's used over and over. It is good. It is good. It is good.
Bad.
And this is the first time he said, this is not good. So what did he do?
He made a woman.
He made woman. He made Eve. How did he make her?
He took a rib out of Adam, and boom.
And it's one of those, there's a lot of stories on what exactly it was. The rib is certainly what I'm going to tell whenever I'm talking to my kids. But there's a lot of question on exactly what this word means back in the Hebrew.
I've heard people say that that Eve was also made, was another version I've heard that Eve was also made, or was made out of Adam's leg.
It's somewhere in kind of in this general area. One that kind of makes sense to me is that Adam had basically both reproductive organs in him, and that's what God took out and reformed a female. So you had a separation of the male female. I mean, I'm not saying that, anything weird, but it was kind of in the beginning, God made it all, and then God separated man into these two pieces. But the important thing is God physically took something from Adam. And I will say also, you have 12 ribs, I have 12 ribs, all humans have 12 ribs.
Besides Adam, I feel like he only has one.
Yeah, I can say there may be something, but anatomically, all humans have 12 ribs. But it was something kind of along the side, whether it was the ovary kind of like structure, whether it's whatever, we don't know. There's definitely some question as far as what exactly this was that was taken, whether it was just living tissue. God had already instilled life in it. He took that and made Eve. But God actually took a part of Adam, something kind of in this area, and he made Eve from it.
I feel like I just either heard a door close or a gunshot. Can't tell which one it was.
Pretty sure that was a door close.
Okay.
Pretty sure that was a door close. So, and then I love this part. The Lord had fashioned a woman from the side of the rib, which he said, and the man, and he brought it to the man. And what was Adam's response in verses 23? I love this. If you look at your Bible here, you notice how this next verse is kind of indented in. Do you know why?
Why?
Because this is poetry.
Poetry.
God brought Eve to Adam, and Adam just flat out broke into poetry. This is my bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. So it's just, like I say, I love it. It's just, Adam is so overwhelmed when he sees Eve for the first time. Thank you, Sam. But sees woman for the first time that he just breaks out into poetry. It's a beautiful thing, and it is a wonderful creation that God made.
What does little have to say? Nothing.
Nothing. So this is the first, second, and third telling of the same story. The first time, it was God created the heavens and earth, period. The second time, he took 7 days. He got in a lot of detail on how and the order of things were created, looking at the actual physics of what happened during this time and the order, and then even the day of rest at the end. All really great stuff on the how of the creation of the earth. And then in chapter 2, we get into the real detail of what he did and why. And it was what was the crown jewel of his creation, and what Adam and Eve and how they were created and how they were absolutely separate. So when you look at chapters 1 and 2, look at it not as, okay, this is the first chapter, but look at it as the story. And the same story told again and again and then again, looking at more and more detail and more importance on what he found important. So, what do you think about that?
Cool.
Oh, one other thing, I forgot one thing. In chapter 24, or verse 24, chapter 2.
You said chapter. Yes, I was right.
For
Yes.
this cause a man shall leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And that is such a great thing, because remember, who are Adam and Eve's father and mother? They didn't have them. There was no father and mother. But even here,
They were the first parents ever made in the
they were the
entire
first
universe.
parents, but they didn't have anything here. But even beforehand, this imagery of Adam and Eve cleaving together was an image that God wanted to make sure that continued forever. You will leave your father and mother and cleave to your wife. And even back then, before there were mothers and fathers. Exactly.
That's disturbing how they say wife.
Well, it was because Adam's going to cleave to his wife.
Oh, okay.
Vice versa works.
Okay.
But it was one of those things where even here, the idea of a father and mother was known, and it was passed on that this is going to be the normal for marriage and what marriage is going to look like in God's eyes. Any questions on that, Finley Sue?
No.
No. All right. Well, thank you very much. We will be back sometime next week, and we will get another version of this for us. All right?
See y'all.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.